From downtown Milwaukee, welcome to Money Talk with Bob Landaas. Each week, professional advisors from Landaas Company Investments discuss the latest financial developments, offering timely insight and long-term perspective.
This is Money Talk for July 12th, 2024. Checking the calendar, the Brew Crew is home with the Washington Nationals. Speaking of politics, the city will be swarming with Republican National Convention. But for some real fun, it's Bastille Days weekend. Police in Japan are prosecuting a woman in her 30s for violating the Road Traffic Act. So what was her violation? She was riding an electric suitcase in downtown Osaka without a license. And even stranger than that, there's no airport in the area. While fishing in Oklahoma, a man admits to killing his longtime fishing buddy out of fear of being eaten by Bigfoot. Fishing and drinking do go hand in hand. Now, I've read this a dozen times, and I can't quite understand this. I have questions like, he killed him to save him from being eaten by Bigfoot? Or he killed him to keep him from turning into Bigfoot? Or he was mad because Bigfoot was catching more fish than he was? I need more details. And finally, at Mickey D's in Indianapolis, employees at a McDonald's told the cops a naked woman jumped out of a car and threw 2 bricks through the windows. The only description witnesses could give the cops was that she drove a white car. No one could describe her face. On the podcast today, we have Art Rothschild, Joel Dresang, Steve Giles, and here's Kyle Tedding.
No closing numbers this week as we record a bit early, but in the midst of what generally is a fairly slow time of year for markets, reduced share counts changing hands, and a lot of traders at the beach, it's a good time, I think, for investors broadly to reassess what they're doing. Not just from a portfolio balance perspective, but making sure that they're checking all the boxes for all of the various items we think are important for savers, important for investors, and most importantly, just important broadly as we kind of think about our portfolios. Art, the kind of first ones I always come to mid-year tend to fall on the saver side of the aisle and looking at how we save money. Are we putting it in the right places? Are we doing everything we can? What kinds of things do you look at when you're talking to clients, when you're talking to especially those younger ones, the kids, about what they should be thinking about how they get to their objectives long term as it relates to kind of what they've been doing so far this year?
Kyle, that's a great question. As you just alluded to, it does depend on age, how much you're making, what stage you're at in terms of accumulating wealth for your eventual retirement. And you really, again, have to optimize the way you put money away. So the first thing you should usually check is employer-provided plans. What is the matching formula? Although that shouldn't be, too many people say, gee, they're not matching, my employer's not matching, so I'm not going to put into a 401k plan. That's not the point. What you should do is realize that if you make enough money, you're getting a sizable tax deduction or exclusion for putting money in the 401k plan. So Uncle Sam is subsidizing your the future growth of your wealth. So definitely put in as much as you can. Definitely go beyond any match to as far as you can go. And related to that is the more you put in, if you're making enough and have enough additional cash flow, you can then reduce your adjusted gross income, which sometimes can cap your ability to put money into Roth IRAs. So if you make too much money, you're limited in what you can put into a Roth IRA. But by putting money into a 401k plan, you're reducing your adjusted gross income and thereby increasing the likelihood that you can put money into a Roth IRA. So I like Roth IRAs for those who make enough money, who've already, topped out what they can put into a 401k plan. For some lower wage earners or folks who don't have accessibility to 401k plans, employer-provided plans, they can open up their own IRAs and get a deduction for putting money in IRAs. So Roth IRAs are hyped quite a bit because the money is going to grow tax-free, but don't overlook the ability to get a tax deduction for traditional IRA contributions and 401k plan contributions. Beyond that, just systematically adding to mutual funds once you've already checked off the first 2 or 3 boxes, 401ks and 403b plans or 457 plans, if you're working for a public employee, et cetera. IRAs, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, and then beyond that, systematically accumulating in a balanced way in mutual funds.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, Art, that a lot of 401k plans now provide a Roth option within the 401k plan. So where before you could only put in traditional dollars that would defer your current income, now the Roth portion lets you do that through salary deferral. You don't get to take the tax deduction in the year you make the contribution, but you can add more money than you could in a Roth outside of your employer plan.
I think so critical mid-year to kind of take a look at all of those inputs, right? How much have I saved so far? What do I have on my tax bill already? What does my income look like? Because it does help to inform those conversations. If you wait until November, it's going to be too late. You've got a month left worth of salary to try to figure out, okay, how do I get to where I want to be? The time to look, start in January and reassess in summer.
One thing I like about the summer too is, so my wife works in education, so we don't have paychecks coming in from her in the summer, and it's a good reminder to me of cash flow, just to sort of see how our checking balance looks different in those months, and to sort of see, the difference that her paycheck makes, and the accommodations that we have to do for that.
My kids are now, Joel, between the ages of 17 and 23, and with their summer jobs, to just sort of remind them that I know how much they're making, they know what goes into their bank accounts, but to get into the habit of starting to save a certain percentage of their take-home pay so that they can build those good habits when they are now with employers that offer these kinds of plans. My youngest daughter, she works as a lifeguard. Obviously, she's not going to be eligible to contribute to any kind of 401k plan, but she is eligible to open up her own Roth IRA. And if she finds a way to not spend all that money at Summerfest, she's got a little bit extra to get her started, which I think is a great lead into one of the other things that we as savers can control. I mean, Art, you talk about how important it is to save. What is the one thing that all of our retirees tell us when they retire? I wish I had started sooner. If I had started sooner, I could have retired sooner. If I had started sooner, I could have more income in retirement. So as much as saving is important, the sooner you start, the better off you're going to be longer term.
Well, and all to that higher goal, right? All to get to that retirement objective that all of us, most of us, some people want to maybe work forever, or if they can work forever. But I think a lot of the folks that we work with are saving for that ultimate goal of retirement. And I think for those retirees, mid-year is a perfect time to review a lot of the plan, right? Art, I know you do a lot of work with your investors on just setting a game plan for tax liability, setting a game plan for what is income supposed to look like in retirement. Mid-year is the perfect time to kind of assess, okay, where have we come? How have we gotten here? And then what are we going to do for the second half of the year to maybe make up for whatever we're missing?
Yeah, fast forwarding from the young accumulator to the retired accumulator as an example. If you have different pots or pools from which you can pull money, I think it's incredibly important to pull out that tax return that you would have filed in April and go over it with your investment advisor to determine the most efficient ways to take withdrawals. It is not unusual for us to see multimillionaire clients who don't have any income and have the ability to, for example, do Roth IRA conversions with little or no tax costs because they're not spending any money, or they've got enough after-tax money that they can spend. So it's an important exercise. This is a great time to do it. Bring your tax returns to your review. Sit down with your advisor. Determine where you should be spending money from if you need cash, and the ability to do Roth conversions. I've had clients do this, not to mention qualified charitable distributions, et cetera, to eliminate the tax consequences of taking money out of your IRA.
Well, and then to fast forward to not just the early retiree, but the late retiree, Art. So those individuals who do have a required minimum distribution that recognize their large IRA, they may pay a lower tax liability to draw it down before their beneficiaries and loved ones get it, right? A non-spouse has 10 years to draw down an IRA. And if you're still working, when you inherit that IRA and you're in your 50s or 60s peak income earning years and you're in a much higher tax bracket, if mom or dad is willing to pay the tax liability at their much lower rate. Again, these are strategies that I think revisiting from time to time are helpful from not just a tax planning standpoint, but also from an estate planning standpoint.
We are not CPAs. We are not doing your taxes as a rule. However, it doesn't mean we aren't part of the tax plan. It doesn't mean we aren't helping you navigate what makes the most sense from a tax liability perspective. And so we do have to be able to have that conversation. We do have it with all of our clients in some capacity. Some need it more than others, obviously. But I do think mid-year is the perfect time to kind of say, okay, here's what we did last year. Here's where we've gotten so far. And now here's where we want to be going forward. And of course, I think it's a similar conversation on the investment front. One of my favorite quotes this time of year, when we have as much information as we already have, comes from Mike Tyson, and it's everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I think it's probably been thrown out on this podcast from every one of us at some point in time. But mid-year, Steve, is the time in which, all right, here's what we thought was going to happen this year, right? We had the crystal ball in November, December last year. We set the plan for here's how we're supposed to allocate. And now we're having that summer meeting and we're going, okay, well, that didn't work and that didn't work. And okay, those 5 things that we were pretty confident on worked great, but I think mid-year is a good time to kind of reassess that plan and figure out what do we need to do different.
Yeah, absolutely. And life is what happens to you when you're making other plans, I guess. So as we continually revisit our plan, as we continually revisit our portfolios, always keep in mind that the best laid plans are the most flexible ones. Things are going to change from one year to the next. I know people that will, plan on doing a big vacation every other year. And that means that they may have to budget for a big expense on those off years. And then other years, they're trying to come under a certain income level to keep their taxes lower. But this, again, is part of the planning process. And we can't help you unless you come in often enough and visit with us and share your goals so that we can make the most prudent decisions.
I think one of the most difficult things for investors to do, and this is a good time to contemplate it, if the market is up, to sell your winners. Everybody wants to sell their losers. And rebalancing the concept, something we practice on a regular basis, requires you to say, you know what, I had 60% of my money in the stock market. I now have 70% or 75% of my money in the stock market. You either better decide that you're okay losing what you've made over time by having a higher amount in the market, or you better rebalance, which will enable you to lose less if the market goes down. So you have to ask yourself the question, I do this with clients on a regular basis, which would you rather do? Make more or lose less? And it's not all or nothing. It's some combination of the two. And invariably, it's important to, if you're running ahead of where you thought you were going to be, trim a little off the top, move it into another asset class, to literally rebalance, smooth out the ride.
Talk a little bit about why it's important to consider that now instead of waiting until November.
I think the key is we enter every investment opportunity with a game plan, right? We enter with this idea that this is the right allocation based on the situation that we currently have. And while it's never the wrong time to revisit an allocation, it's never the wrong time to reallocate. I think sometimes having that prompt of, okay, this is probably a good chance for me to reach out. Again, as I mentioned at the open, things a little slower come July. It's a pretty good time to say, what did we miss so far? Is that going to continue or is it a one-off? And how's it going to impact what we do going forward? And so I think, it's less about, well, it needs to be July or it needs to be mid-year and more about, no, that's just a good mental reminder. And it tends to be when we have some brain space to begin with to say, okay, let's revisit that process and just make sure it still makes sense.
What makes it difficult, Joel, is that as human beings, we're emotional. So the more the market goes up, the more we want to put into stocks. The more the market goes down, the more we want to get out of stocks. By adhering to an investment policy strategy, hey, I want my portfolio to be 60-40. You are removing emotion from that investment decision. As an arts example, if the portfolio now has 75% in stocks because the market did well, it is an unemotional decision to rebalance back to 60% because that's what the plan called for longer term.
And then there's a question of style or jurisdiction. If you're in growth stocks and they've gone up and they're pricier, and the more conservative, what we call value stocks, haven't done as well, perhaps it's important you've got two choices here, and it becomes very subjective. It's not just the results are objective, but the subjective part of this is momentum. Oftentimes a market will speak to you, you could be hearing something wrong, but either you double down on your winners or you, again, rebalance, move some of the money to some of the things that are going to give you a smoother ride, over time. International investing as well. It's been very out of favor for a long, long time now. It could come back at some point, but again, the momentum has been with the U.S., with the way we've come out of, COVID, et cetera. But you have to factor all these things, when you're making these types of decisions. That's why it helps to talk with your advisors, do your reviews on a regular basis. And this is a great time of year to do it.
And I would also add to that, Art, that don't leave your loved ones or your family in the dark with respect to your situation. I can count more times than I wish the number of individuals who have come to me and said, we just got word that a CD came due that mom opened up 6 years ago. We had no idea about it. Our estate's been closed for years. So tell your kids where your money is, where they can get a hold of us at Landaas Company, so that they don't leave you with a big mess to try to sort out. It's a hard puzzle to put together when you don't have a roadmap.
Summer's the time when we see a lot more family. We're doing the 4th of July party, or we're doing the into summer party. We're traveling with the kids and the grandkids because they're out of school. And I think it's a good reminder also that it's a time when you might want to rethink what's changed in my life, whether that's, do I have a lot more family members than I used to or a lot less? And how does that impact things like beneficiary designations? How does it impact my estate planning? What kinds of changes, as I kind of get together with family over those summer months, what kind of changes might be necessary based on what's happening, within my own little universe? I think the other thing, we often wait until later in the year to have these conversations, but summer's a good time to start the plan. One of my favorite podcasts every year, the Giving Podcast we do the day after Thanksgiving. Well, yeah, that's great. That's a good time of year, given it's Thanksgiving, to have the conversation. But Art, it's probably an even better opportunity now to start to lay the foundation for, here's what I want to do later in the year as it starts to fit into all these other conversations we're having. Yeah,
this is the time to make those plans. For those who are charitable, again, one of my favorite things we always talk about at the end of the year, qualified charitable distributions. Those who have IRAs can give money to charity. You can get you a checkbook, give money to your church or humane society, whatever you want to do. This is time to plan. Do it now before you've already taken out your minimum distribution. Gifts to family members. Great time to sit down with the kids or grandkids and, dole out some money or take a trip to Disney World or whatever you're going to do. And also from the perspective of what you should do or have, the older you get, I think the more important it is, as you just suggested, to see an attorney, get an estate plan, go over where your assets are going to go. And as Steve indicated, keep it simple. Consolidate everything at a place with people you trust to help you and those who come after you, and get a power of attorney and let us know who that power of attorney is in case you're incapacitated in some way and we have to, help your family with your money. We need that.
I think such an important set of kind of topics to talk about. They're things that we are constantly harping on, constantly reminding of as we have conversations with clients. I think a reminder how important it is to sit down and just go through these things, whether it's January, July, or December. You have to have those conversations. And again, I think summer's always an opportunity for me to just take a step back and go, all right, what are some things that I should be focusing on right now? With that, we enjoy doing the program for you. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you for listening to Money Talk with Bob Landaas. If you have a financial question you want answered on next week's show, email it to moneytalk@landaas.com. To keep informed throughout the week, visit our Money Talk page at landaas.com.